9/11 truth about that. So I've been meaning to make this video for a long time. I don't make a lot of videos on 9/11 truth because there's just so many other people who've done way better jobs than me that I always try to direct people to them. This is one of the websites I always direct people to. So what I do want to address though is all the so-called debunkers, and instead of going over individual videos and explaining why each one is wrong, which I can do, but I thought a way to start would be to hit the main points that I see, the main fallacies that I see them commit over time. So, just for the uninitiated, 9/11 has an official story to it that says that 19 hijackers from working under the guise of, or under the guidance of Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed coordinated an attack and attacked basically some of the most sensitive areas of the world, New York City and Washington D.C. Especially they also managed to attack the most guarded building on the planet. Just put that into your mind for a second, bud. So the official story has a lot of holes in it. That is, if you look at the evidence and the facts surrounding the events, those 4 plane crashes and the events that led up and what happened afterward, you find a lot of discrepancies. Now, the number of discrepancies is so vast that many so-called debunkers will use this as a ploy to say, well, they always bring up one thing and then another thing and then another thing, and that is wrong because they don't want to focus on anything. And they say, well, how do you falsify your argument? Well, here's a way. The strongest core evidence, I believe, is the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers on 9/11. Most people are familiar with just the 2 largest towers, but most people aren't aware of Building 7. Just quickly, I guess I'll show you all. For those who are not familiar with Building 7, I'll show you a quick video of it collapsing. I know I did spell it wrong, but you know how Google is. It'll work. So here is a collapse footage of Building 7. This is the tower most people aren't aware of. This happened on 5/20 that afternoon. So we can rewind that real quick. As you can see, the building collapses completely into itself in about 7 or 8 seconds. It experiences free fall. Free fall is basically the speed at which anything falling through gravity that has no resistance under it falls. So if you drop your keys to the ground, your keys fall at free fall, and so did this building for most of its as you can see, there were fires, but the fires weren't very big on the floor. So I just wanted to quickly show everyone and acquaint them with Building 7's collapse and the freakish nature of it and how peculiar it is. So the official story, that is, which was an investigation by a government agency called National Institute of Standards and Technology, ruled that the collapse was caused by simple office fires, which if you're a forensic engineer, you should know is a huge problem because there's always office fires all over the place and we never see buildings collapse like that. So for those that need a falsified argument, like a core argument, I point to the way the buildings fell. So really quick, we see that they have here listed on this website, which is representing over 2,000, specifically around 2,300 architects and engineers. Let's see, it's a 501c group that are calling for the public to look at the science behind the way the buildings fell, and they're trying to show that due to certain laws of physics, it's impossible for the buildings to fall at the rate of free fall like they did, and to have the temperatures recorded, and to find certain materials in the dust, which is an anomaly in of itself, because why was the concrete pulverized? Gravity just doesn't have this much power. So there are independent researchers that are into looking at this, and there's 10 points of evidence they put down. Things like the rapid onset of destruction, constant acceleration, numerous eyewitnesses of explosions, lateral ejection of steel being implemented into buildings so that the force was equal to a cannonball being shot 3 miles, and the cannonball is 100 pounds, so you need some kind of an explosive source for that. Mid-air pulverization of tons of concrete, isolated explosive ejections, total destruction of the building, molten steel and iron, which is impossible to get with iron with office fires. Impossible to get molten steel, thermite incendiaries, and nanothermite composites. I encourage anyone to go to this website if they want more information. There's lots of materials here to read through. So basically, I'm doing this to give an example of a core foundation of the problem with the official 9/11 story given to us by the United States government. So what we find instead is that there must be something alternative, but the problem is that most people cannot handle the implication, because if Al-Qaeda didn't put the bombs in the building, then who did? So this is a huge issue for people to understand and try to grasp, and because of that, they have a lot of problems. Now, the debunkers that I see are the people who are usually not sitting on the fence or quiet about it, but are in the face of people trying to expose the truth of this, and their arguments basically amount to a bunch of fallacies, and we're going to go over most of them or many of them today. So most of the fallacies and arguments that the so-called debunkers and 9/11 truthers have stem from a kind of a bulverism. So bulverism is basically the idea that you want to prove, instead of proving your opponent's argument wrong by showing that it's logically inconsistent or factually untrue, instead they want to show that they already assume that it's wrong and want to try to understand what your motive in understanding it. So for instance, they want to look at your motivation for believing the argument as opposed to what the content of the argument is. They call it a subject to motive shift in the analysis of the discussion. So an example of this for 9/11 truth debunkers would be first to assume that the concept of anything besides the official story would be completely ludicrous, and instead to look at and say, well, the reason why person X believes in this conspiracy theory is because they want to see the world in a simple way. They want the world to be like a cartoon, and certain kinds of nefarious bad men that are pulling the strings, as opposed to actual events and complications and complex integrations of different behaviors and people and times. So when thinking about what's wrong with that, what we see is that instead of a person saying, look, steel can't melt due to office fires and jet fuel, instead you say, well, you don't understand. You believe this story because you're looking for an overall generalization, or you like the thrill, or you like having knowledge that not everyone else has, so you like to feel special. You like to feel like you're embarking truth. You're so arrogant. You call yourself a truther. You're just trying to make yourself look better than other people. All these kinds of arguments and statements are forms of bulverism. So, a classic, you claim A is true, you claim 9/11 was, the official story of 9/11 is not true, but because of your motivation to believe it because you are a conspiracy theorist. You want 9/11 to be not what it seems to be. Therefore, your statement and your claims are all false because you, being a conspiracy theorist, want a conspiracy. Now, mind you that the official story is a conspiracy theory. I just want to make a quick little footnote here. The term conspiracy theory was first popularized by the U.S. government in something called Operation Mockingbird, which I will put up real quick. And this was a campaign by the CIA to influence media organizations like the New York Times. And what they did was introduce the term conspiracy theorist for them to label anyone who questions the JFK story. Because the idea was it's only Oswald and only him, and you need at least two people for a conspiracy. But for the 9/11, what happened on 9/11, we have already a conspiracy. We have the 19 hijackers and Osama bin Laden and Sheikh Mohammed, and Al Qaeda in general. So because of that, it's one conspiracy theory against another, basically. So when people say, oh, it's just they label someone who questions or is a skeptic about the official story of 9/11 as a conspiracy theorist, all they're doing is saying what they are. They're also a conspiracy theorist. So the idea is that they're still using the CIA tactic from the fucking 60s. That's how pathetic it is in their arguments. And that's why I'm making this video, because I see it all the time. I see it everywhere. Now, let's move on to something that's within Bulverism, which is like appeal to motive. Yeah. So here we see that people will say something like, "Well, yeah, David Ray Griffin is very compelling researcher, but he's just trying to sell books." Or Stephen Jones is someone who just wants attention. Or Richard Gage from Architects and Engineers. They just want people to, they like conflict. They like controversy. They're not, sincere in their actions. So we can see that when a person makes an argument like this, they're trying to point out the motive of the person, and they just want to show how the motive. Now, at first, you may, if someone isn't trained in logic and philosophy, they may feel like this is a particularly valid form of argument. You say, well, it's just your personality. But what you don't understand is you're not actually. It's a kind of red herring. You're stepping away from the argument. You're going away from dealing with the content of the claim the person made, and instead beating around the bush to point at something else as a form of a distraction. Like a red herring was a distraction for hunting dogs, as a way to throw them off the scent of the trail of the fox or whatever they were trying to hunt in these hunting competitive games. So here, although it may make sense on an intuitive level that a person's motive is important for why they believe something, and it is, but when trying to actually disprove an argument, you can't deal with motive, for the simple reason that a person may have a nefarious motive to tell you 2 + 2 = 4, maybe as a way of manipulating you or trying to impress you to take something from you, right? But instead, it's still true. You can't ever say, well, his motive is wrong and bad, so 2 + 2 = 4 is untrue. No, you can't. You can't do that. So next, very popular fallacy that I see these 9/11 debunkers, quote unquote, do is they like to ridicule truthers. For one thing, they call them truthers. They'll call them tinfoil hat wearers, conspiracy theorists, people who live in their mother's basement, people who have no social skills, people who have very little prospects in life, people who are involved in constant fantasy and are like disassociated from reality, and all these things, basically making the person into a joke. So the idea is to make the person seem so stupid that they must be wrong just because they're stupid. Now, it's mockery, basically. Now, the problem with this is, again, it doesn't matter how stupid a person is. If they say 2 plus 2 equals 4, it still equals 4. It doesn't matter if they're the village idiot or the person who got a perfect score on the SATs. There's no difference. We have to look at the content of the message. We cannot look at the messenger. I know, it's hard for some people who are not trained in philosophy to understand, but this is the basis of critical thinking. Being able to separate opinions from facts. Being able to separate what a person is trying to present as and what a person is actually saying. So, basically, when you hear people making fun of conspiracy theorists, they're not attacking the argument, they're just appealing to ridicule. Basically, they're appealing to ridicule. Another form of fallacy that we find a lot is people appealing to the populace as saying, well, no one believes this stuff. It's completely stupid. Everyone's gonna think you're crazy, or everyone thinks you're crazy, and everyone already believes this and you believe that, so you are wrong. So, this is more easy to understand. It doesn't matter if 1 million people believe 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's never going to be right, no matter how many people believe it. It doesn't really matter how many people will believe it. That I had to cut out for a second. So the idea here is that it's like a bandwagon kind of. You're just telling everyone, look, everyone believes this, and if you don't believe it, you're wrong. So, this is pretty simple to understand, but this happens all the time in these so-called debunkers. They'll just say, you're ridiculous, no one believes this, this is fringe, you're wrong because of that. So this is just another reason, another fallacy that they commit. Moving on, we have a kind of, another form of like a ad hominem, basically. What we have here is people attacking the personality of the person with the message, and again calling them, insulting them, trying to make them feel bad, right? All these things are, of course, not engaging the argument. You're sidestepping it. But on a personal, on a intuitive level, people feel as though that it makes sense to them. Our kind of evolutionary hand-me-downs of the tribe and certain kinds of projections of power and intelligence, which are not true projections of it, but kinds of hacking that kind of system where people present themselves as this, but they're not really like that. And one way of confusing a person to find a way to make them feel that they're wrong, to do this to an audience, is to discredit them, a kind of poisoning the well. You just tell them, this guy right here is a complete idiot. He's not a true American. He's not a patriot. He hates his country. He's completely insane. All these things are ad hominems. All these things are ways of just attacking the person and not the argument. So we can see that the general pattern here is that instead of engaging the actual argument, we have a sidestepping and a moving of the goalpost so that something, the audience and the debate is moved to something else that's completely irrelevant to the actual matter. If a person makes a claim and someone refutes that claim, they have to attack and engage the claim. They cannot sidestep the claim and start talking about the person who made the claim. This is not the way argumentation, logic, and reasoning works. So, when you see this happen with the 9/11 truth debunkers, quote unquote, point it out for what it is: a shaming tactic, a cheap way of sidestepping an argument. It's not an argument. It's a lack of an argument. It's a fallacy. It's the same idea with character assassination. trying to destroy the credibility of someone. You say, oh, Stephen Jones was forced to resign. Richard Gage never worked on a high-story skyscraper. Dr. Griffin was a religious and philosophy professor. What does he know? Or he's a loon just for that. All these things, again, are ways of sidestepping the moral. It doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't matter if the village idiot, if the guy who has been wrong a million other times or has been not reliable in any other way, comes up and makes a claim and says 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't matter how unreliable his past is. The fact that he made that claim at that moment, and it's true, you can't look at the person. You always have to look at the claim. And it's very important, and we always forget this, especially dealing with these very sensitive topics that people really don't want to deal with, because if it is true, and it is, that the official story is a lie, people are going to have to sit with it. It's not something to just forget about. It's something that affects you, and it changes your whole life. It makes you reevaluate almost everything that's going on in society. Everything that you supported, everything that you thought was true, everything you thought made sense, stuff you thought was part of your history, was a complete farce. Complete farce. Now, there is sometimes these debunkers do attempt to deal with the argument. But instead, they create a straw man. Now, what is a straw man? That is, instead of actually attacking the argument, like actually attacking the actual claim, they create a claim that seems similar, but it's actually not the claim, and then attack that claim and bring it down. And yeah, it's like a fake person or a fake figure. So it's just like a straw man. Instead of like a real boxing match with a person, you make a straw man that looks like a person and then knock it down. Obviously, a straw man is not the real person. What they're claiming they're refuting is not the real claim. They're creating some other thing. So one popular one is that fire does not need to melt steel in order for it to get soft. And they'll throw this in your face. This makes no sense considering the fact that there was evidence for molten metal and evaporated metal and steel. So it doesn't matter if it's possible that metal could sag without burning, steel can sag without melting. It doesn't matter, because when you already have melted steel, that just kind of makes that point moot. Or renders it moot. Another popular one is that the rate of free fall is makes little to no sense. That it doesn't really matter, when in fact it does. I can't think of any, because there's really not many, because they don't work that well at them. They'll make the claim that, well, I see the problem is a lot of the strawman arguments deal with things that don't even have to do with the actual point. So, for instance, he'll say something like, "Oh, you think Bush had a bomb device and was setting up and pushed the button, or you believe that there was RDX in the building, when in fact no one's calling for RDX, or you believe that no planes actually hit the building, right? Because there's some, which I believe are disinfo agents saying that, or that a nuclear bomb hit the building, or that a space beam, a directed energy weapon hit the building. Like, all these things are all red herring fallacies. So, and it can be, and I have to give credit in the sense that it can be confusing with the mirage of different, of points. Now, I think that is a testament. All these different points about the story and all these different barrages of evidence that go against it greatly shows how this is a true, not a true thing, but how it is a true lie. Or it makes no sense, but it is a lie, because there's just so much wrong with it. It just doesn't match up on so many levels. But it is confusing, but that's why I want us to all focus on the buildings themselves, because it's the buildings themselves to provide the physical evidence that contra not social norms, but physical norms. I mean, you can talk all day about whether or not a person came to work, what that means, or if a person was sitting on their ass for 2 hours before they made a move, what that means. But it's hard to argue that the way physics work and have been working since we discovered their laws just happened to stop working on one day in September in 2001. It doesn't make any sense when you try to argue physics. Physics are indisputable. Sure, so when we talk about quantum mechanics, but we're talking about macro physics here. We're talking about bodies in space with physical properties that are necessary in order to build these skyscrapers we see. The engineers and architects learn how matter behaves at such scales in order to build things. And guess what? There's over 2,300 of them trying to tell us that there's something wrong with this story, that it can't happen according to these laws, according to these principles. Now, of course, people might say, well, there's 1 million or 2 million or 10 million architects and engineers. What is 2,000? Again, it doesn't matter how many there are, but it goes to show you that although there is 2,000 here, in the people who created the official story are only comprised about 10 people. And what's really interesting is that you don't see an organization of architects and engineers supporting the official story. You don't see that. You don't see people pulling up the official story's data and showing it off as good and saying this makes sense. You don't see anyone doing that. You just see people ridiculing people when they bring up this information and ignoring them. It's a fallacy. It's a way of avoiding the situation. It's a way of sticking a head up an ass. Their own asses. I'm sorry to be vulgar and whatnot, but it's true, and it makes me upset. But I have to control myself. My nerves keep on breaking. Or aching. One of those two. So, like I said, I'm going to put this in the description, this website right here. I feel like this is basically all you really need to understand the official story is false. There's much other information, stuff about what happened before, intelligence mix-ups, things with NORAD, things with the visas that were given to the hijackers, the lives of the hijackers, all the fact that hijackers were found alive after the event of 9/11, all these things all contribute to showing the official story is false. But this is the most pertinent. This is the most strongest. This is the stuff that if they can prove this wrong, that the buildings can behave this way, then this throws everything else into question. This is the crux. Now, there are 3 specific points. Any one of them can be what causes the official story to be wrong. But there are 3 of them. One of the supporters of this group, a man named David Chandler, who has graduate degrees in science and mathematics and teaches mathematics and physics, has made a presentation and has done many presentations online. I encourage you all to look him up. You'll see his name soon. He's made very wonderful and very detailed videos on how the physics of 9/11, how the towers came down, all 3 towers. Cannot make any sense using a physics software kit in order to track the pixels and see the rate of fall and the rate of acceleration and whatnot. So he has come up with 3 specific points about what happened that day to those buildings that are the crux of all the evidence they have. And I feel like 3 points are always the best. I always like to do things in threes in terms of when disseminating information. 3 points. It's very easy for people to understand, and 3 is always better than 2, and 2 is always better than 1, and 3 is better than all of them. And 4 is too much. 4 is when you start to lose people. But 3 points very well. And he has a +1 that I think you all should see, because I think it's very interesting. It's not something that I push a lot. I always push just 3, but the +1 is very important too. And it tells you that this goes beyond just maybe a mix-up. Like, this is definitely involving government and people within government. I'm not saying the whole government, but factions within the military-industrial complex. I also encourage people to read Another 19 by Kevin Ryan. He was fired after from Underwriters Laboratories, the company that checks all the material in your house to make sure it's safe. He complained, saying that the steel in the tower should have not reacted that way. They reacted like glass as opposed to steel. And he got fired for questioning it. So let's go to David Chandler real quick, and he gave this talk, I believe, in the there's a guest lecture at Arizona State University, and the lecture is called 9/11 Best Physical Evidence of Explosives. And so let's just see the 3 points, what he has to say. We're not going to watch the whole video, but here he sums up the 3 points. So watch. Sorry for the noise as I move the mic over.
Matters of fact cannot be decided on an a priori basis. You have to actually look at real evidence. My goal is to focus on just a few key pieces of evidence. Each of them is sufficient to demonstrate that the official narrative of 9/11 is false and the truth lies elsewhere. So my point is, I have 3 key trains of evidence here. Any one of them is sufficient to show that the official story is false. And I call this 3 plus 1. The 3 are these. Okay, first of all, the World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7 could not have collapsed in the observed manner as a natural result of airplane collisions and fire, as claimed by the official story. Direct observation and analysis of the dynamics leads to the conclusion that explosives had to have been used. And I'm going to spend most of my time this evening on this branch of the topic because this is where I've been directly involved. The other 2 deserve equal length talks. By the way, when I spoke at the Toronto hearings, I took the entire time just about the collapse of Building 7. So there's a lot to say about this. I'm going to cover all of the collapses as my main thrust this evening, and I will at least get some mention of the other 2 in as time. The second strand is extremely high temperatures existed during the collapses, and they persisted for months in the rubble pile, literally for months. We're talking about temperatures that could not possibly have been achieved by the open air burning of jet fuel, which is essentially kerosene, and office furnishings. Office furnishings and kerosene burning in open air miss the required temperature to melt either iron or steel by 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. There's that big a gap. And there's concrete evidence of molten iron and or steel. You might be asking yourself, where did this iron come from? But that's another question. And number 3, the reaction products from thermitic materials were found in abundance in the World Trade Center dust. During the investigation of these reaction products, actual unexploded flakes of military-grade nanothermite were found and later identified in the dust. We do not claim these were the only energetic materials used to bring down the buildings, but the quantity clearly indicates it played a major role. The presence of nanothermite again supports the dynamic and thermodynamic issues stated above. And then the plus 1. The other thing that is so blatantly clear in all of this is the fact that there is a concerted governmental corporate media cover-up that continues to this day. Okay, so in those of us who are involved with the science of this, primarily confront this when dealing with NIST. The National Institute for Science and Technology is the agency, it's an agency of the government, you need to keep that in mind. It used to be called the National Bureau of Standards. But that's the agency that was tasked with explaining the collapses. And their explanation, I don't know, 10,000 pages plus or minus, they don't even talk about the collapse. Literally. We'll get there, okay? I realized in the preparation of this talk that I don't really have time to cover all three strands of evidence and do them justice. I was really sweating it to cram all this in, and I really can't. So I'm going to put my energy where I have the most direct experience, and I will at least give sort of an outline for the thermodynamic stuff, because there's a lot of very key items there. And then for the nanothermite, I have a 10-minute video clip I'd like to show at the end by Jeffrey Farrar at Brigham Young University, who actually was probably the key researcher in the discovery of nanothermite.
And I'll leave him at that. So, as you can see, I'm not mad anymore. So as you can see, this is one of the supporters of this group, and he is absolutely very well researched, and as you can see, he's talking from experience a lot, which is very good. He's talking about what he's an expert in, mostly. So that goes to show you that he's not trying to push things that he doesn't understand. He's trying to show exactly what he is fluent in, and this is why I am compelled to research all this, because there's a lot of truth here. So, basically, like I said, the point of this video was not to start making claims of evidence for 9/11, but was to show how the so-called debunkers of this movement all committing fallacies left and right, and are all also have no credibility because of this. I also wanted to show people a way to focus and hone in 9/11 truth, so we focus on these 3 points as opposed to the million other points we could have, because this is the strongest. This is, as I said before, you cannot argue with physics. So these 3 points and plus one, which is interesting to mention on top as the cherry on top, will be the most strongest way to focus and show how the official story is false. Once we get the physical data down and that becomes accepted, then we can start to focus on the broader, or the things beyond just the physical collapses of the towers, like NORAD or the intelligence agencies and what they knew or didn't know, and whether or not people who sat on their ass for hours were doing it intentionally or not, or that were difficult to find, were doing this intentionally. All these things have to be looked at only after we get the core of, like David Chandler said, that the core of the evidence of this movement, the core, the physical evidence that provides the foundation for everything else. Remember the 3 points. We'll say it one more time. 3 points are the rate of free, the way the building came, all 3 buildings came down at or very near free fall, the high temperatures that were discovered in all 3 buildings, and after that burned for months after in the rubble, and finally what was found in the pulverized concrete dust, iron microspheres and nanothermite, unreacted nanothermite chips that provide probably main incendiary source for what brought down the towers. And you would expect, if someone was using explosives, some of it to not blow up and some of it to be in the residue, and that's what you find. So I'll start trying to make other videos about this, and I think I pretty got to a point. I haven't exhausted this by any means, but I've gotten to a point where I think I'm pretty. I think the message, my intended goal, is pretty stated. It's been messaged. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I just want to, like I said, show how the debunkers are full of shit, literally, because they're fallacious arguments go nowhere, and how people can hone in their 9/11 truth knowledge, those 3 points, and if they want, add that +1 with the cherry, as a cherry on top. So, with that said, I want to thank you all for listening. Please comment if you have any comments, questions. You want to call, if you are one of these debunkers or people who believe that 9/11 truths, people who espouse 9/11 truth are wackos or full of shit, please comment. We can have a pretty civil discussion. Unless you're going to resort to insults, but do it anyway, because it's just great to show off how you work, and I can show other people, look how, as an example, look how he does this, the insults. So please comment if you like this video. Please like it. Please share it if you think it's important. If you want, subscribe. I always make new videos about once a week, twice a week. I make videos right now. So please subscribe. The more subscribers I get, the more content I will create. The more comments I get, the more content I create. If you think any of the stuff on my channel is interesting, please let me know about it. I will content. If people suggest things to me, I will consider it, and I most likely will do it. Beyond that, subscribe, share, check out my blog, check out my Twitter. Those things can be found easily through my YouTube profile. My Twitter and Google Plus stuff is all there. My blog should be there. And so yeah, thanks for listening, and have a good one. Too bad it doesn't go into infinity.